Now we're going to take the board that we prepared and we're going to start to paint. I've taken my palette and I've added some water to the colors in another section, another division. This is just a very simple palette. The palettes that most watercolor painters use are more elaborate than this, but this is a good way to start out. In our first division, we're going to put a flat wash. So I'm going to paint water, plain water, onto the paper first. And while it is still wet, I'm going to take some of my blue that I've mixed with water, and I'm just going to paint that on here to cover this so that it is just a flat blue color. This would be a background that I'm going to paint over top of later. We're going to do 6 little mini paintings with these divisions, like so. In the next section, I'm going to start with another color. I think I'll use red this time for a change. I'm not going to paint water first. I'm going to load the brush pretty heavy and I'm going to paint the red across the top. And as that drip forms, I'm going to go back and just add plain water and go again, like so. And as that drip forms, I'm going to add more plain water. And it will get lighter. Hold the board at an angle as you come down. Now this is pretty light at the bottom, but that's okay. And this is called a graded wash. It goes from a darker color to a lighter one. And if we leave this tilted while it dries, some of that will transfer down. This is great for skies and those kinds of things. In fact, if I wanted to, I could take a little bit of the blue while this is still wet and add it on top, and we should get a little bit of a violet going down. And it almost looks like an atmospheric effect. You can take a dry brush and kind of pick up your bead of water at the bottom, like so. In the next section, we're going to use a very limited palette. We're going to use blue and brown. And incidentally, if you mix blue and brown together, you can get a wonderful gray. Now, I'm not going to do anything to the paper first. I'm just going to paint a little bit of blue on here. Have it come down. This is like the sky. I might want it a little bit darker at the top. Like so. I might even throw a little brown in it to gray it a little, so it's a little bit of a cloudy kind of sky. Now I want the horizon to not be just straight across because that's boring. So we're going to go like this. Then I'm going to take my burnt umber and I'm going to paint the bottom with the burnt umber, like so. And while it is still wet, I can actually take the end of my paintbrush and make indentations into this, that they can be like trees or marsh grasses on the bottom. Maybe we're going to go to the ocean. And what happens is the watercolor paint that is there will pool into those little indentations. And you'll have already the beginning of a painting. In the next section, I'm going to save the white for the watercolor. Watercolor paper is white, and the beauty of watercolor is when the colors, when the paint is on there and the sky, the light shines onto it and reflects through. Now what if you want to have a sailboat and you want the sailboat, you want that sail to stay really white? If you paint the sky like this or like these over here, how are you going to get a white sailboat? Traditional watercolorists do not want to use a white paint. You can do it, but it kind of loses the beauty of the watercolor. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start with a sailboat. I'm going to do the sail. Now if I was doing a really big painting and not just learning some techniques, I would draw this first very lightly in pencil so that I would know where I'm saving my whites. So I'm going to cover this with this resist. This resist will peel off. It's a little bit, if you remember using rubber cement, how you peel that off after it dries. But it will keep this white paper so that you can paint over it and keep it white. I have two types here. This one is a blue, it's a little bit thinner, and then I use another one that's called a masking fluid. Now I'm going to put another sail on this side, like so. These little plastic bottles work well. If you use a paintbrush, you can use a paintbrush. You should take a bar of soap and rub the soap into the paintbrush. Make sure you don't use a really good paintbrush because it has a tendency to kill your paintbrush off, and you don't want to do that. Here's my sailboat. I'm going to keep it white. Now I'm going to come back later and I'm going to add shadows, details, textures, and things to the sailboat, but there's no way I can get that white back once I've painted over it. Now let's put some water in here. Maybe we'll make the line for the horizon, about there. And maybe some little areas of white caps, some splashy little waves in the water. We'll save those white. Maybe we'll have a little flag up here on the top of the sail. Okay, now that's going to have to dry before we can do anything else. Make sure you put the lid back on your container. In the next section, we're going to do something that is called wet into wet. And this is when you paint a color and you drop other colors into it. So I'm going to take some pretty wet paint on my brush. I'm going to cover this section with some, let's mix them together a little bit. Some yellow and some red, so we get a bit of an orange kind of wash there. You can see that. Now while it's still wet, I'm going to take another color and I'm going to drop it down into that while it's still wet. This is called painting wet into wet. I can turn the board in different directions, like so. And you can kind of play with it a little bit. I'm sure you did this when you were a kid, playing with your watercolor paint. You can even take a straw and blow the paint around too. My resist is moving there. But it makes some pretty neat effects when you do that. Let's turn it upside down and do that again. Now we'll let that dry. We can come back and make that into a picture. In my last section, I'm just going to do another flat wash. And what I like to do when I paint is let's put some water on here. And I like to take a little bit of red and just throw it here. And not really paying any attention to what I'm going to paint into that. I'm just painting red there. And then I might take a little blue, throw it here, maybe here, and some yellow in some places. And then I'm going to let that dry, and I will come back later, and that'll just be in the background of the painting. As you can see, it's just there together, it's running, and we'll let that dry. Okay, I will show the next step in the next video.